Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyil mustafa Muhammadin al-mab'uthi bil qur'ani huda wa shifa wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa kullu man bihadihi iktafa wa bi atharihi iktafa. First of all, I would like to thank Ustaz Dr. Uthman Muhammadi for the opportunity given to me, which I take to be a great honor. And this is my certainly not my first visit to this new campus, but my first public appearance here as a lecturer, not as a student anymore. I used to be student of ISTAC for almost 9 years. Yes. I did my master's and PhD at ISTAC, but before ISTAC moved to this beloved new campus. That's why I'm familiar with many faces, in our library here and in the administration as well. Today I will talk about the challenge of Orientalists in Islamic studies. If I've chosen this topic, this is because I believe that while most of us are occupied with our works, I'm sure only a few of us are aware of the challenges that are confronting those who are studying Islam using English as a medium of instruction, or those who read and write in English. I will begin with a brief historical survey, then followed by examples and a discussion of the methodologies and approaches taken by Orientalists in their studies. The recent decade has witnessed the mushrooming of academic departments, centers, and institutes in the Western world devoted to the study of Islam and Muslim societies. While this phenomenon is to be welcomed, it is worthwhile to revisit the long history of Islamic studies in the West and rethink its methodologies as well as its impacts on Islam and the challenges it poses to the Muslims. Just a few days ago, I watched a speech given by Professor Yuan Cole.
What's that?
Yuan Cole.
Yuan Cole.
Yes, he's a professor at Michigan University. He gave a public lecture to officiate the opening of a new center for Arabic and Islamic studies in Villanova University. Let us begin with clarification of relevant terms. The word Orientalist refers to the Western, mostly but not only Christian or Jewish scholars of Islam. They have been so named because they focus their studies on the lectures and civilization of the Orient, or East, or Morgenland in German. Morgenland means the morning land. That is of Asia, including the study of languages, literatures, history, and religion of the people of the Orient, of the East. They are concerned not only with the great living civilization, the civilization of Islam, of India, China, but also with ancient civilization no longer existing, such as those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Thus, Orientalists, for example, if you go through their journals, you find their publication on the languages which are no longer spoken, such as Akkadian, Syriac, Aramaic. This interest in the cultures of the Orient was part of and imbued with the spirit of enlightenment, what the German called Aufklärung. This was an intellectual movement that swept Europe in the 18th century, from where comes the slogan, Ex Oriente Lux. From the east comes light. Light comes from the east, which is true. Why? Because the sun rises from the east. In the last quarter of the 19th century, Orientalists from different branches of study started to meet together to share their research findings and exchange their views. The first Congress of Orientalists was held in Paris in 1873. Since the second half of the 20th century, however, the word Orientalist was dropping out of use, as many specialists in different fields rather preferred to call themselves Indologists, Sinologists, expert on Chinese culture and civilization. Indologists means expert on Indian languages and cultures. Arabists, Islamologists, or Islamicists. As for the term Islamic studies, it refers to the study of the religion of Islam and of various aspects of Muslim cultures and societies. So they publish journals, except the one on the left, further left. The other two are published in Europe. Studia Islamica was founded by Joseph Schach and Robert Brunswick. Robert Brunswick collection is here in our library at ISTAC. For those of you who do not yet know. And Journal of Islamic Studies, of course, come from Oxford, Center of Islamic Studies. Otherwise known as Islamology, this is French, Islamstudieren, Islamkunde, Islamwissenschaft in German, or simply Islamistic and Islamics. Islamic studies carried out in the West was, as we said earlier, part of the Oriental studies, Études orientales, Orientalistic, Orientwissenschaft, and was sometimes also called Arabic studies, Estudios Arabes or Arabistic. Why did the Westerners, the Europeans, study Islam? Interest in the study of Islam arose in the West as a result of inevitable encounter between the Christians and the Muslims since the Middle Ages, and was growing during and following the Crusades, which lasted for almost 400 years. But this interest to study Islam was also intensified after the Spanish Reconquista. Why? Because the Europeans at that time, before the Renaissance, they knew and they were struck by the achievement of Muslims in Spain. It started with what we may call the translation movement, whereby numerous books written in Arabic by Muslims, of course, were rendered into Latin. The movement took place mainly in Spain and Italy, but also in France, England, and Germany. As early as 1143, the Holy Quran was rendered into Latin. It was not an exact translation, but a paraphrase, very bad paraphrase. As later reviewers said, done by Robert of Caton, or Robert de Chester, and given the title Lex Mahomet Pseudo Prophetae. There is a quote from the paraphrase of Surah Al-Fatiha. As I said, it is not an exact translation. Incipit lex Saracenorum quam Al-Quran voca begins the law of the Saracens, of the Muslims, which they call Al-Quran, which is, that is the beginning, Collectionem Praeceptorum Azwara means surah, prima means first, the first surah, Azwara prima. Misericordi più cua Deo, Universitatis Creatori. You can guess, Universitatis Creatoris Rabbil Alamin. And you can read by yourself the rest. Then followed the Latin translation, in addition to the Holy Quran, of numerous philosophical and scientific works, such as Ibn Sina's Kitab Ash-Shifa, translated as Liber Sufficientia, and Al-Qanun fi Tib, Liber Canonis Medicina, Al-Zahrawi's Kitab Tasrif, Al-Battani's Kitab Zij, the Numeris Stellarum et Motibus, to mention but a few. There is a long list of Arabic works in different fields written by Muslims, which were translated into Latin. From the 16th century onwards, Arabic language and other Islamic languages, especially Persian and Turkish, began to be taught at major European universities, such as Paris, at Collège de France, Oxford, Cambridge, Leiden, after Salamanca in Spain, Rome, and Bologna. As a result, numerous, mostly polemical writings on Islam and its prophets soon appeared, which show the double impact of European exposure to, it is the old spelling, Arabic learning. There was the positive impact, which was the revival of learning called Renaissance, but also negatively, the vilification of Islam. So they admire, on the one hand, the Europeans admire Muslims' achievement. On the other hand, they hated Islam. Only a few sought to be objective, though hardly succeeded, like Lancelot Edison. He was for some time ambassador of the British Empire in North Africa. On his return to England, he wrote the first state of Mohammedanism, this is how he spelled, or an account of the author and doctrine of the impostor, published in 1678. Then a Dutch Orientalist named Adrian Reln published his 2-volume work, De Religione Mohammedica Ribli Duo. This was followed by a work in Germany, which was a dissertation, in fact, doctoral dissertation, written by Johann Christoph Wischmanhausen. It is a philological study of the Quran, titled Positiones Philologicae de Alcorano. A French who was quite sympathetic to Islam, named Boulainville, wrote La Vie du Mahomet. Why it was published in London, this explains the reason that the French at the time were fanatic Catholics. The modern period saw an important event. In 1789, Napoleon of France invaded Egypt with a military force, accompanied by a large team of scholars, of Orientalists assigned to study the language, the culture, and religion of the Egyptian people. This is just one example. Why? Because the German also invaded East Africa, and the Italian came to Libya, to North Africa, and the British came to India. They didn't merely come, not for nothing, of course. Such event made the link between scientific studies and political or colonial ends even more transparent, replacing, some would say supplementing, the evangelistic or missionary aims of Islamic studies done by Europeans. Islamic studies in the service of colonialism was shown par excellence by Orientalists such as the Dutch Christian Snoeker, who, before he came to Aceh, spent a year or two in Mecca, disguised as a mu'allaf. So he introduced himself to the sheikh over there, the mufti of Mecca, Sheikh Zaini Dahlan, as a Muslim. This Dutch Orientalist had mechanical face, and there are chairs. In fact, he was advisor to the Dutch colonial government. The 19th century saw new development, Geschichte des Korans, history of the Quran. You see the dedication page. Ignaz Goldziher und Christian Snuppurchronje in Dankbarkeit und Verehrung zugeeignet. In gratitude and respect, dedicated. So they were friends, but Goldziher was a Hungarian Jew, Orientalist, and Hurchronje was a Dutch Jewish Orientalist. Well, this may be just a coincidence. Drawing upon the classical and biblical scholarship, the new approach comprises textual criticism, form criticisms, literary criticisms, and source criticism. Thus, in 1927, Professor Alfonso Mingana was originally from Iraq. He was an Iraqi, but acquired British citizenship. So he worked in Birmingham University. Until now, if you visit Birmingham University Library, there is a special collection of Professor Mingana, Arabic manuscript collection. In a journal published that year, he wrote, "The time has surely come to subject the text of the Quran to the same criticism as that to which we subject," we, of course, he means his friends, his colleagues, the Christians, and to which we subject the Hebrew and Aramaic of the Jewish Bible and the Greek of the Christian scriptures. So he was calling for critical studies of the Holy Quran. This was also supported in other fields, in the field of theology, by no less than Professor William Montgomery Watt of Edinburgh University. Professor Montgomery Watt was also a priest. He was a priest of the Episcopal Church of Scotland. He wrote in his book, The Formative Periods of Islamic Thought, that before any attempt is made to describe the development of Islamic thought, there has to be a radical critique of the sources. What he means by the sources here are texts. So this is still in the spirit of historical textual criticism. The application of historical and form criticism in the study of Islam was also shown by John Wansbrook Quranic Studies. His other book, which applied the same method, is The Sectarian Milieu. He was here hinting at the Jewish and Christian background of Islam. And he viewed Islam as a heretic sect of Christianity. His two students, Patricia Krohn and Michael Cook and Patricia Krohn are now teaching at the professors at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, published their book, Hagarisms, The Making of the Islamic World. But I would say ridiculously, they wrote explicitly in the introduction that this is a book written by infidels for infidels, which is very interesting.
Written by?
This is a book written by infidels for infidels, written by a kuffar for kuffar. I'm quoting, underlying the historical critical approach is the unproven assumption. Now this is hidden, that events like the rise of a new religion or a new social movement must be explained as historically dependent on previous and or contemporaneous ones. So you must always try to connect Islam with previous religion or religions of the Near East. Such unproven assumptions leads to the denial of absolute originality to any phenomenon under investigation. It also implies that only Orientalists who have the philological skills to analyze Islamic texts can do the job properly. The second implications, therefore, is rejected by especially American Orientalists, who said that we can also study Islam using sociology, anthropology, like Clifford Geertz. You don't have to be expert in Arabic in order to be scholars of Islam or of Muslims. So the rejection of the second implication gave rise to the so-called area studies. So now, or since the publication of the International Journal of Middle Eastern Studies or Journal of Southeast Asian Studies, who are not necessarily expert in Arabic. Consequently, will develop theories of influence, theories of origins, theories of borrowing, theories of evolution, theories of development, which guided the Orientalist research. I give you several examples here on how the Orientalists applied theory of influence and origins. There is a book which is edited by Ibn Warraq, this pseudo name, collecting the articles translated into English written by Orientalists, titled The Origins of the Quran. But long before, a German Orientalist, Josef Horowitz, who was working at Frankfurt University, wrote an article in the German Orientalist Society Journal, Alter und Ursprung des Isnad, the age and the origin of Isnad, in which he claims that Isnad, the Muslim method or theory of Isnad, was borrowed from the Jewish tradition. And as you know, Professor Mustafa Azami has written a refutation of Yosef Shah's book titled The Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence. So they like this theory of origins and influence. Even the great ones, like Reynold Nicholson, subscribed to this theory. So he wrote, Muhammad picked up all his knowledge of this kind, of the Quran, by hearsay and makes a brave show with such borrowed trappings, largely consisting of legends from the Haggadah and Apocrypha. This is from heretic Jewish and Christian tradition, heretic tradition of the Jews and the Christians. That was his accusation. Beginning from Wellhausen, Julius Wellhausen, down to Wagner, Judith Wagner, the Orientalists were busy trying to expose what they believe as Jewish or Christian parallels. Abraham Geiger published his book titled Was hat Muhammad aus dem Judentum aufgenommen? What has Muhammad from Judaism has borrowed, has taken? Charles Torrey wrote the book The Jewish Foundation of Islam. Now, this is a piece of article by Wellhausen, who says here that the name Ar-Rahman was originally from Hebrew, from Aramaic, and so on and so forth. Others joined the chorus, like Abraham Kach and Judith Romney Wagner, who wrote Islamic and Talmudic Jurisprudence, the four roots of Islamic law and the Talmudic counterparts. We should stop for a while to reflect. What are they trying to say, and who are they addressing? Who are they writing for? Now, since they are writing in English, and we are speaking and teaching and listening and communicating in English, we like it or not, willingly or unwillingly, we will be influenced by these writings. Ignaz Goldziher was one of the examples who applied the theory of development in his book, Mohammedanische Studien. He wrote, "For us, the hadith are not authentic record of Islam's early history, but merely reflect opinions of conflicting groups within the community, which emerged during various stages of its development." The point here is trying to make is that it is not hadith which gave birth to theology, but it is theology which gave birth to hadith. See, they like to reverse. And I have a few other examples. It is like Karl Marx's statement, "It is not God who created man, it is man who created God." Das Hadith wird uns nicht als Dokument für die Kindheitsgeschichte des Islam, sondern als Abdruck der in der Gemeinde hervortretenden Bestrebungen aus der Zeit seiner reiferen Entwicklungsstadien dienen. The key word is Entwicklung, the development. So they like this idea of development, which is just an assumption. Goldziher's thesis were taken up by Joseph Shah in his revaluation of Islamic tradition published in the Royal Asiatic Society Journal. And the title of Joseph Shah's article here has been, I think, adopted and translated by one of the anti-hadith anti-hadith movement leader here in Malaysia. Hadis satu penilaian semula. Hence, meaning from the application of historical criticisms, we find the Orientalist attempt at reconstruction of early Islamic historical events. It is an article, for example, by Andreas Gorka and Gregor Schuller, reconstructing the earliest Sirah texts, the Hijrah in the corpus of Urwah ibn Zubayr, reconstructing early Islam, truth and consequences. You have to imagine, to understand, to grasp what they mean, and the underlying idea behind this word, the term reconstruction. And also their attempt to restore Islamic texts, beginning with Gustav Flügel. This is a German Orientalist who published in Leipzig Quranic Textus Arabicus ad fidem librorum manuscriptorum and impressorum. This is what he believed to be a critical edition of the Quran. Gotthold Beckstresser, in the following century, also German Orientalist, collected what he called non-canonical readings. It is the Qira'at Shadha, because he wanted to do like what the biblical scholars did to the Old and New Testaments. And Otto Kretzel, also his colleague, wrote this Plan eines Apparatus Criticus. So he and Beckstresser were planning to produce a critical edition of the Holy Quran with the whole apparatus criticus, notation and footnotes, so the Quran with footnotes. And Arthur Jeffrey was also trying to collect materials for the history of the text of the Quran. An attempt at copy editing the Quran. Now this is one of its impact in the Malay world. Edisi kritis Al-Quran. One man, a lecturer in an Islamic university in Indonesia, wrote this article. He said he wanted to take up the job. He wanted to produce a critical edition of the Quran. Or questioning the Arabicity of the Quran. Maybe the Quran was not originally written or spoken or recited in Arabic. Christoph Luxemburg is a pseudonym for a Christian Lebanese scholar living now in Germany, who published his book, Die Surah Aramische Lesart des Koran. It has been translated into English recently. Ein Beitrag zur Entschlüsselung der Koransprache. Report about his work you can read in Newsweeks, in major world magazines as well. New generation of Orientalists trained in the European tradition adopted the so-called literary approach, viewing the Quran as a piece of literature. Now this is important. They view the Quran as a piece of literature to be studied as such, regardless of the problem of origin which had occupied their predecessors. So they say, since the Quran is influential, it doesn't matter whether it is a word of God or a word of man. Let us study it as it is. You know, it sounds better, but it is not. Why? Because this means they are analyzing the Holy Quran as a historical document, taking the Quran as a cultural product, a product of the society like any other text. Thus, John Wansbrookes is in this book, Quranic Studies, is saying that it is not the Quran which shaped the community, but it is the community which formed the Quran. I said, like what Marx said, it is not God who shaped man, but it is man who created God. And they organized a symposium, the result of which was published as a book titled The Quran as Text. This is following the Abu Zaid, Nasr Hamid Abu Zaid's affair. In fact, by taking the Quran as a piece of literature, the Orientalists assume that the text is human. It's a literary piece composed by man, and so they in fact return to their medieval bias. So you see, there is not really a big or major shift between the old and the new modern contemporary Orientalists. This is what we find in 17th century. Translation of the Quran into Latin published in Germany in Hamburg. Al-Quranus, S is for silver, or Lex Islamitica, this Ash-Shari'atul Islamiyah, Muhammadis. Now this is the name of the author, according to the publisher, Fili Abdallah bin Abdullah, pseudo-propheti, the false prophet. One Orientalist, Karl Ernst, I think now he is in the University of Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. He said when he was a postgraduate student at Harvard University, one day he went to the library, to the Wedener library, to do some research on the Quran. He was surprised, he said, because he was trying to look for the Quran in the catalog and couldn't find it. But when he asked the librarian, he was told that you should look under the author's name, Muhammad. Why? Because he said the same is not true for the Bible. For the Bible, you look from B, Bible, and not under G, Jesus. And it is so until now. I don't know if Harvard library has changed afterwards. Unlike Islamic studies carried out by Muslims, Islamic studies done in the West by the so-called Orientalists, Islamologists, are characteristically different. Now this is what we should know. The difference between what Orientalists are doing and what Muslim scholars, like from Imam al-Bukhari, Imam al-Shafi'i, down to the shuyukh of Azhar. There are several differences. First, the Orientalists look at Islam as a subject of study or as a kind of symbol for the focus of their research, and not as a divine truth and guidance for mankind. So they are trying, as Karl Marx said, to misrepresent Islam. They said to represent Islam, but in fact they are misrepresenting Islam through their publications. A second point of difference, the Orientalists seek relevant data about Islam for the sake of research, regardless of the meaning that Muslims as adherents of Islam attach to them, and irrespective of the truth which Muslims might recognize in them. So they don't care whether you consider the Quran as a book of revelation or as a book written by man. Next, the Orientalists investigate Islam as a social phenomenon, approaching things Islamic from the historical, cultural, sociological, anthropological, political, or literary perspective, and not merely from the viewpoint of Religionswissenschaft. So they are applying various approaches, historical criticisms, cultural approach, sociological, anthropological, and political perspectives. Hence, they make a distinction between what they call normative Islam, which is a set of prescription, norms, and values that are considered as embodiments of divine guidance, and actual Islam, which is the various forms and practices that have in fact existed in many Muslim communities in different times and places. Now, the outcome, the consequence of this distinction is fatal. Now they are especially contemporary or modern Orientalists are introducing many categories, like they say Moroccan Islam, Pakistani Islam, so Malaysian Islam, as if there are many Islams. So you find as well categories which are unacceptable to us, like Islam thought versus Islam observe, militant Islam, fundamentalist Islam, classical Islam, medieval Islam, modern Islam, radical Islam, progressive Islam, liberal Islam. I don't know what comes next. I completely agree with what the late Professor Albert Hurani of Oxford University, he was a great historian, who observed that he was referring to the Orientalist researchers. These researchers by Orientalists have begun to have an influence on the way in which Muslims think of their own past. Thus, for example, he says, a certain kind of modern Arabic thought appeals to the example of the Mu'tazilah. This is what they call the Neo-Mu'tazilah. Whether or not it interprets them correctly, and philosophy, as a result, has reappeared in the Arab world as a living mode of belief. I think Professor Urani was referring to people like Abid Jabiri or Hassan Hanafi, and those who try to revive the Ibn Rushd tradition of philosophy. They say that the Muslims nowadays are backward because they reject philosophy. Now a few remarks on Orientalist studies by critics like Edward Said. Edward Said just passed away. He was until his death professor of literature, English literature at Columbia University. In his famous controversial book, he said Orientalism is an academic effort to mummify Islam, to treat Islam like mummies, not mothers, of course, like the Egyptian mummy, meaning here that they are dealing with Islam like a corpse, like a dead body. From the general point of view, says Arkoun. Arkoun is now editor, professor in Paris, and editor of the Orientalist journal Arabica. He says that from the general point of view, French as well as British Orientalism can be said to have been linked, though not necessarily caused by the colonial strategy of domination. So this is an honest admission. And Immanuel Sivan is a radical Jew. Why? Because he wrote the book Radical Islam. He says that undeniably Orientalism facilitated remoteness, control and occupation. Intelligence means military intelligence, and Orientalisms were, and sometimes still are, tightly linked. Now from Muslims' point of view, Roger de Pascuy is a Swiss Muslim convert who wrote Unveiling Islam. He says that the studies carried out in the West have demonstrated only one thing, meaning the studies of Islam, the anti-Muslim prejudice of their authors. Professor Fazlur Rahman, in his article, which he presented in the meeting of Giorgio della Fida Award, wrote that even Muslims who come to Western centers and pursue Islamic studies go back to their home countries trained as Orientalists. By the way, Professor Fazlur Rahman's collection is also in our library. And Professor Abdul Latif Tibawi, he was originally from Palestine, working for some time at Harvard University, and a friend of Professor Arbery. He wrote in his critique of English-speaking Orientalists that students, this is his advice, Muslim students must receive thorough grounding in their tradition, in their own countries, before they ascend to any Western institution to study with Orientalists. Otherwise, they will come back as Orientalists, as Professor Fazlur Rahman said. Before I close, I would like to add two more examples. As I gave you an example of what Wansbrook and Goldsheer said. Now what Joseph Shah said. Joseph Shah said that it is not the Sunnah of the Prophet which gave rise to the fiqh, to the sharia, to the law. But it is the other way around. It is the fiqh which gave rise to the hadith and to the sunnah. You see, they refer everything. Everything which Muslims believe. Allow me to read this verse from the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 120. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَلَنْ تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. And this is not an advertisement, just an information. I've written a book on Orientalist for deeper and detailed treatment. You can refer to this book. Unfortunately, it's still in Malay. And it is certainly a book written by a Muslim for Muslims. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jazakallah.
First, I thank you for the comments and questions, remarks to Dr. Ali Akbar Ziad. I think we just communicated through telephone. Yes, last week. I agree with you that here during my talk I didn't touch upon postmodernism or its relation with Orientalism. But this is the topic which I proposed to the organizer. But if you want to relate our subject today, Orientalism, with postmodernism, we can look at the work by Edward Said. Edward Said's book, Orientalism, is in fact many in the West have considered this book as a postmodernist critique of Orientalist discourse. So this is a kind of a discourse analysis. And Edward Said, as he admitted also, used the French, the French thinkers' idea of archaeology of knowledge. That is by Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault wrote several books like The Order of Things, Les Mots et les Choses, and Archaeology of Knowledge. So it is a tool for discourse analysis, how to analyze what people are saying, what the people are writing. So talking about Orientalist and its critique is in fact a kind of a postmodernist deconstruction, because we are here trying to deconstruct what Orientalists are doing. Why? Because they are making many, we say, ridiculous categories. And they are trying, for example, to set a binary opposition between liberal and fundamentalist Islam, literal Islam, for example, and illiteral Islam. Or one Orientalist, Professor William Biddle, has also introduced another category, scripturalist Islam, meaning these are Muslims who attach too much weight to scriptures, to the Quran. Now to the second question, what is the solution? How to meet these challenges? I would propose two solutions. One is, of course, what Professor Abdul Latif Tibawi has mentioned, that we have to know, we have to learn, we have to study our own tradition. We have to know the Holy Quran. We have to be familiar with the Quran and with the Hadith. Now, we have to finish reading the Sahih Bukhari from cover to cover. At least, a survey, like a glance. Most of us, we do read the Holy Quran from cover to cover, but not collections of hadiths of the Prophet from cover to cover. And another solution is, of course, to visit the library. I used to say to my daughter, my eldest daughter is now going to graduate from primary school. I said, if you want to be a scholar, I said, you should not Facebook, but you must book face. I said, when I was your age, I was not Facebooking, I was book facing. So the solution is you know that you must read. Why? Because there is another story. In 2003, it was Ramadan. There was one fellow from Oxford University who came to UAE to catalog manuscripts, Arabic manuscripts, which UAE library just bought. And we had a cup of coffee. And I asked him, I said, what do you know about the ISTAC? I said, well, we have all works which you have done. Meaning here, whatever you have written, we have it. I said, where? At Bodleian Library. I said, including thesis? Yes, even the thesis. I said, no, theses are not published, are not for public, and outsiders cannot get access to thesis collection. But he said, well, we got it from a friend of a friend of a friend of your friend. So the point here is that those people are trying hard to know whatever you know, so that they can tell you that what you know, we know. What we know, you don't know. So what we read, they read. But what they read, we don't. So you see here the problem. And so if we want to overcome this, we want to meet their challenge, then we must read what they read. We must know what they know. What about Islamic languages? That was the term used by Orientalists, and I was referring to the teaching of Muslim languages. But of course, we don't exclude other languages like Urdu, Malay, and Pashto, for example, Persian and others, and other languages spoken by Muslims in Africa. Those are also deserving of the name Islamic language, since they are spoken by Muslims. Are there such things as Muslim Orientalists? Muslims by name or nominally, but Orientalists in its mentality? I think so, yes.
There.
Yes, even though some might argue that it is an oxymoron, it is a contradiction in term, that an Orientalist cannot be Muslim or Muslim cannot be Orientalist. But perhaps we can say a Muslim influenced by Orientalists. To Dr. Fatima Abdullah, I just received your book from the Research Management Center yesterday to review these issues in Usuluddin. Dr. Fatima has just published her book.
On what?
Titled Issues in Usuluddin.
Oh, that's very fascinating. Issues in Usuluddin.
what should be our attitude towards bridging peace and interfaith dialogue? In a conference, in a seminar last week or 2 weeks ago, I was trying to highlight the difference between da'wah and dialogue, interfaith dialogue specifically. In a da'wah, you know your position already, and you hold your position firmly. Why? Because you are calling people to your positions. That's what da'wah is. Meaning you know the truth. You know that you are with the truth and the truth is with you. But in an interfaith dialogue, you are supposed to give up this truth which you think you have. Why? Yes, because you are coming. In fact, you are invited to a position, yeah, of relativism. That truth is relative, and that everyone is right and nobody is wrong, and that truth is plural, not single and not absolute. Plural meaning, yeah, there is truth in you, there is truth in me, and what is true for you, yeah, it might be false for others. So truth is relative and subjective. So this is really a kind of higher sophisms. So the conclusion is that our attitude towards interfaith dialogue should be perhaps negative. Meaning here that I agree with what Dr. Fatima said. We are tolerant, we are encouraged to live, to coexist peacefully with followers of other faiths. That we have to treat people of other religions, other races, as nicely as we should, as shown by the Prophet, because the Prophet neighbor was a Jew, and the Prophet never attacked his neighbor who was a Jew. So he lived with and surrounded by Jews. From the Prophet was also living in a plural society. Not pluralistic society, in a plural society, in a multi-racial and multi-faith society. But the Prophet, even though he lived with Jews, with Christians, but the Prophet never said, well, you are also right. My religion is true, but your religion is also true. No, he never said that. In fact, he was told, "Qul ya ahlal kitab, Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun." So this is my brief answer, and I return. So what are we to do as students, as scholars, in response to what Orientalists are doing? First of all, we must understand and we must bear in mind that we cannot control what they are doing. We cannot stop them. We cannot ban them from doing. We cannot close their centers, departments of Islamic studies in Western universities, in American universities. We cannot. We cannot drop bombs. No, that's not the solution. So we cannot. To make it short, we cannot control what they are doing. We cannot stop them, but we can control what we are doing. So I combine the first question with the last one. Collectively, as Muslims, individually, yes, we must stop Facebooking, and we must turn to book facing. That's individually. Collectively, in fact, the establishment of ISTAC, why this very institute was established, was one of its primary objectives was to respond. He had to respond intellectually and responsibly, and not emotionally, and not ignorantly to the Orientalists, to what that's why the first symposium, the first conference organized by ISTAC was Islam and the Challenge of Modernity. And by modernity here is the Western world, is the non-Muslim world, because this is the most now the dominant, the prevailing power in the world. So collectively, we Muslims, we should work in this institute to produce scholars, to produce, I would say, tigers, not cats. Why? Because cats can support only fishes, but tigers. Are there differences between German, American, French, Italian, Orientalists? If you ask me to generalize, I cannot, because they will protest. If I say German Orientalists are such, or French Orientalists are such and such, they will protest. They will say, no, we don't fit to your category. But their works must be evaluated, I think, case by case. Why? Because some of them are focused on one area, and others focusing on other domains, other fields. But if you want to see common features, or salient features in their works, yes, perhaps you can highlight. For example, most American Orientalists, I would say, are more inclined to a sociological, ethnological, or anthropological approach, what they call area studies. So they prefer Middle Eastern studies, Southeast Asian studies. Then only recently, after the September 11 bombing, they set up departments of Arabic and Islamic studies. So most of them, they prefer this approach, the sociological, empirical studies of Islam and Muslim societies. This is in contrast to European tradition, represented by the Germans and the French, which are more philological and historical in their approach. So they like to deal with texts. So they publish series like Texts and Studies. Texts and Studies. This is one of the dogma, one of the four dogmas which Edward Said raised. Edward Said said there are four dogmas of Orientalists. The first one is, he said, the absolute and systematic distinction, opposition between West and East, Orient and Occident. This is the first dogma according to Edward Said of the Orientalists. And in this systematic conceptual differentiation, they say that the West is rational, is mature, is developed and superior, whereas the East, the Orient, is inferior, is infantile. Infantile means childish. It's underdeveloped and irrational. You know, this is in fact racism, kind of racism. Why? Because the Japanese also belong to the East, to the Orient, and the Japanese, the Japanese are able to challenge and to compete with Europeans, with Americans, technologically and scientifically. So this category is absurd. The second dogma, according to Edward Said, is abstraction. Is preferred by Orientalists to empirical studies, to empirical data. So this fits, we said, the characteristic or the description of European approach in Oriental studies, because they emphasize textual and historical studies, which is a kind of abstraction. Meaning here, they want to describe, they explain the Muslims through text. The third dogma, according to Edward Said, is that the Orient is uniform and incapable of self-representation. They cannot represent themselves. That's why they must be represented. It is the third dogma of Orientalists. The fourth one is that the Orient must be feared or be controlled. The Orient is treated or is imagined like a beast, like a ferocious beast, to be feared or to be controlled. And hence, the idea of domination, of colonization. But this is the literary critic by Edward Said against Orientalism. As for the British Orientalists, what is the characteristics? Are they closer to the American or to the European tradition of scholarship? I would say the past one, meaning here, British Orientalists of Arborist generation and before, or Nicholson's, they were closer to Europeans in their approach, because they were still dealing with texts. And this Gift Memorial series devoted to Gift. But 20th century and 21st century British Orientalists are closer to the American trend. I don't know much about the Italian scholarship on Islamic studies, or the Spanish ones. Now, what about the interfaith dialogue? She's afraid that if we adopt a negative attitude towards interfaith dialogue, this will create, especially locally, will create tension perhaps between different groups. But I would say that it is okay to differ. Meaning here that it is permissible to have different perspective, different views, as long as it is not against, not contrary or contradictory to the principles of Islam, to the teachings of the Quran. That's why both parties, both groups who are pro and contra, who are for and against interfaith dialogue, are trying to seek to find justification from the Holy Quran. So they say, in the Holy Quran you find Ya Ayyuhan Nas, but without Qul. Or others would say, in the Holy Quran you find Ud'u ila sabili rabbika. Well, Ud'u is not interfaith. It's not a dialogue, it's a call, it's invite. And invite you, if you are inviting, if you are inviting me to your house for a dinner, please do so if you can. Then you are supposed to have a certain fixed place, a fixed position, so that you can invite me. Otherwise, if I ask you, where should I come? And you say, anywhere. Why? Because anywhere is a valid and true place for dinner. That's not an invitation. Invitation should be to a fixed position, to a fixed place. So truth must be fixed in da'wah. But in the interfaith dialogue, as far as I understand, truth is not fixed. In fact, it must be open. Now, the idea of Occidentalism as a reaction or counter concept to Orientalism. Occidentalism, this was proposed by Sadiq Jalal Azam. He wrote an article in Arabic, Al-Istishraq Mun'akisan, Orientalism in reverse. In this article, he disagreed with Edward Said, and he also suggested that we Muslims, if you are not happy with what they are doing, then why don't we Muslims, or why don't you Arabs, he said, do a counter-attack. If you feel that the Orientalists are attacking you, why don't you do the same? And this kind of discourse, you can call it Occidentalism. And Hassan Hanafi went so far as to write a volume on this idea, al-istighraq, as opposed to al-istishraq. But I think those are mere discourse. But the real and concrete one is to found and to can say to enhance. There was a meeting to enhance ISTAC, ISTAC quality. Is to set up institutes like this one, and to train students and to make them scholars, to make them world-class scholars. This is the real kind of Occidentalism or counter-Orientalism. So this, alhamdulillah, I think I have, I believe I have answered all the questions. Thank you, Ustaz Uthman Muhammadi. Although until now, I'm still wondering about his nisbah, al-Muhammadi. Maybe I can get some explanation after this talk. First is about Arkun's postmodernist critique. Yes, especially his influence in Southeast Asia, since some of his books have been translated into Malay, like Lecture du Coran has been translated and published by the Netherlands Indonesian Cooperation. And it's available here in our library. It's a very nice print. And also it's Pour une critique de la raison islamique. That's also, I think, has been translated into Malay. Yes, I'm aware of the influence Arkun has exerted in academic circles in Indonesia and students. But I don't think that their impact is really threatening. But what I would like to remark here is that in confronting the Orientalists, in confronting our opponents, those who are working not for Islam but working against Islam and against Muslims, I think we should not be close-minded and we should not be extremists in our approach, in our attitude. We should open our minds. That's why here, I think ISTAC is a very good example. Why? Because it used to have professors from different faiths, and it used to have professors of different sects or of different madhab. And it used to teach its students different languages, not only Muslim languages. Persian was always offered every semester. And there was a plan to teach Turkish. And as students, I still remember, we had also classes in German. And we studied Latin and Greek. So our attitude should be open. Meaning here we should not be extremists. We should not close our mind. But at the same time, we must be critical. I'm not finding fault, but I'm just making a small observation that those people who fall victims to the Orientalists are people who lack a thorough grounding in their traditions, who are not really familiar, who don't know much about their own religion. And these are also people who don't know much about the Orientalists. And to be able to analyze, to go deeper, to dissect their works, to go through all their writings, you need many tools. And these tools are first languages, and second is philosophical analysis, which is rooted in logic. So you must be trained in logic, and you must familiarize. We have to familiarize ourselves with philosophical insight, and we must have as well a good historical knowledge. During my time at ISTAC as a graduate student, what I found lacking was not the philosophical training and logical analysis or a linguistic competency, linguistic education, but historical training. Maybe because there was only one historian at that time, Professor Ipsilli, and he was just visiting, spent one semester here, then going back to Turkey. Whereas in the West, in America, in Europe, people who are majoring or specializing in Islamic Oriental studies, they are trained in histories. How many of us are familiar? If you are given several names, for example, if you are majoring in fiqh and usul, you are given, let's say, 4 names: Ash-Shafi'i, Ash-Shashi, As-Sarakhsi, and Al-Qarafi. Now you arrange these 4 names chronologically, then geographically, then according to the madhab. How many of us are able to do that? We don't have that historical knowledge. I don't know what the ability to analyze texts. So this is what I believe that we have to develop if we want to cultivate confidence, self-confidence. So while there are people who are influenced by Arkuns and his like, there are more who are waiting for and who are looking forward to positive writings by Muslims. Now, what about Orientalists like Henri Corbin, William Chittick, and Karen Armstrong, and others who seem to be sympathetic to Islam and seemingly also are not fitting into the Orientalists as Edward Said criticized. One of the fellow students told me that William Chittick one day, it was years ago, visited ISTAC.
Oh, he came.
Yes. And he went to see the director, Professor Alatas. And one of the, after a long talk, this was what I was informed, Professor Alatas just asked him one question. He said, "Are you a Muslim?" And Chittick was silent. He didn't answer. So simple questions, for a professor who has written books on Ibn Arabi, who spent more than 20 years reading Ibn Arabi's Futuhat. And he was asked these simple questions: "Are you a Muslim?" He could say just yes or no, but he didn't say. So maybe for people like Chittick, the question is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether he's a Muslim or not. But for Muslims, it does matter. If he is a Muslim, then of course his works will be considered. But if it's not a Muslim, then what are they talking about? Now, this raised therefore the problem of authority. Who should we listen to? Who should we follow? That's the problem of authority. Now, the last one. If Orientalists are able to analyze us, to analyze Islam and the Muslims, to classify us, to make us, to subject us into studies, why can't we? I think the answer to these questions is not rhetorical, but rather practical. We must do our job. So finally, it boils down to individual work, to personal responsibility of every one of us, as student, as a lecturer, as professor, as scholar. And inshallah, with sincerity, with hard working, and with the help of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, inshallah we can meet these challenges. وَكَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Of course, the challenge of Fir'aun was so tremendous, and Moses was just a small guy in the empire of Fir'aun, but he could finally abolish the empire. Okay, thank you for your patience and your attention, and I apologize for any words which might cause inconvenience. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.